Hello, my little downloads. Today I'll be reading my Radioapple fanfic. I will be reading the entire of the first chapter. I may make tiny mistakes when reading. I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 1, the very beginning. Alistair's POV. Back when I first met Lucifer, I believed he was nothing more than another obstacle, another powerful fool draped in confidence and arrogance, another ruler convinced the world bent to his whims. I had met countless souls like that before. Kings, tyrants, celebrities, overlords. Everyone eventually revealed themselves to be disappointingly predictable. So when I first laid eyes on Lucifer Morningstar, King of Hell himself, I expected nothing different. I was wrong. Terribly wrong. The first thing I noticed wasn't his power. Odd, considering power was usually the first thing I noticed about anyone. No, it was his smile. Not because it was intimidating, not because it was threatening, because it looked genuine. A ridiculous thing to remember, really. The King of Hell standing before me, dressed far too extravagantly for someone of his status. And all I could think about was how strangely real his smile looked. As if he had somehow forgotten he was supposed to be feared. As if he genuinely enjoyed existing. The thought irritated me immediately. And yet, I couldn't stop looking. His golden eyes caught the light every time he moved. His white suit was spotless despite the chaos surrounding him. Every gesture was animated, expressive, impossible to ignore. He wasn't composed. He wasn't intimidating. He wasn't even particularly graceful. He was loud, dramatic, a little ridiculous. And somehow, that made him more interesting than anyone else in the room. I remember watching him speak. Not listening, watching. The way his hands moved when he became excited. The way his face lit up whenever he discussed something he loved. The way his entire body seemed incapable of hiding what he was feeling. For someone who had spent centuries mastering masks and performances, there was something fascinating about a man who wore his heart so openly. I told myself I found it amusing, nothing more, a curiosity, an entertaining distraction. Certainly not admiration, certainly not attraction. That would have been absurd. I was Alistair, the radio demon. I did not become attached. I did not become fascinated, and I certainly did not spend the following weeks finding increasingly flimsy excuses to remain in the same room as him. Yet, somehow, I always found myself nearby. A meeting here, a conversation there, a chance encounter that was becoming suspiciously common. Each time, I learned something new. How his voice softened whenever he spoke about his daughter. How he became nervous when discussing things that mattered to him. How he would laugh at his own jokes before anyone else had the opportunity. How he always seemed just a little lonely when he thought nobody was looking. That last one lingered with me, because I understood loneliness. I recognized it immediately. It hid beneath the smiles, beneath the theatrics, beneath the endless jokes and grand gestures. A loneliness so carefully concealed that most would never notice it. But I did. And for reasons I still cannot explain, I found myself wanting to know what put it there. I wanted to know what made Lucifer laugh. What made him angry. What made him afraid. I wanted to know why his smile sometimes looked forced, and why his eyes occasionally drifted toward empty spaces, as though searching for something long gone. The more I learned about him, the more dangerous the situation became, because somewhere between our arguments and our endless attempts to annoy one another, and the conversations that somehow stretched late into the night, I stopped seeing the king of hell. I started seeing Lucifer. Just Lucifer. The man who rambled about ducks for an hour without realizing it. The man who desperately wanted to be loved. The man whose eyes sparkled whenever someone genuinely listened to him. The man who made me laugh when I wasn't supposed to. The man I found myself searching for whenever he wasn't around. I never intended for any of it to happen. If someone had told me then that one day, the more sound of his voice would make my heart... I'm going to reread that. If someone had told me then that one day, the more sound of his voice would make my dead heart feel strangely lighter, I would have laughed in their face. But affection rarely asks permission. It arrives quietly. A glance held a second too long. A smile you start looking forward to. A presence that begins to feel necessary. And before you realize what's happened, you're already lost. Though, of course, I wouldn't admit that for quite some time. After all, this was Lucifer Morningstar, and I was far too stubborn for my own good. Lucifer's POV. Unfortunately, so was I. Back when I first met Alistair, I was convinced he hated me. Actually, no. Hated might be too weak a word. I was pretty sure he wanted to throw me through a wall. Maybe several walls. Possibly a building. The first time we spoke, he looked at me with that stupid smile of his. The one that never changed no matter what he was actually thinking. At first, I thought it was confidence. Then I thought it was arrogance. Then I realized it was somehow both. And for reasons I still don't understand, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Which was unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Because Alistair was annoying. Painfully annoying. The kind of annoying that lingered in your mind long after he left the room. Every conversation felt like a competition neither of us had agreed to. Every sentence sounded like a challenge. Every compliment was somehow also an insult. And somehow, I loved every second of it. Not that I realized that immediately. No. At first, I simply became aware of him. The way one becomes aware of a song stuck in their head. No matter where I went, there he was. Standing in a corner, leaning against a wall. Watching everything. Watching everyone. Watching me. Especially me. And every single time I caught him staring, he would smile. Then somehow make me feel like I was the strange one. It was infuriating. I remember one particular meeting. I had been talking. Okay, rambling. Fine. I had been rambling for 20 straight minutes about ducks. In my defense, ducks are wonderful. Anyway, everyone else looked bored out of their minds. Charlie was trying to be supportive. Vaggie looked seconds away from ending me. But Alistair was listening. Actually listening. Not pretending. Not waiting for his turn to speak. Listening. I remember glancing toward him and finding those crimson eyes fixed entirely on me. For just a moment, the room disappeared. The noise disappeared. Everything disappeared. And it felt like I was the only person speaking. Like I was the only person worth listening to. The feeling caught me so off guard that I forgot what I was saying. I never forget what I'm saying. I talk constantly. It's one of my greatest talents. Yet somehow, one look from him had completely derailed my train of thought. I hated that. I really, really hated that. And unfortunately, it kept happening. Every time he laughed, every time he smiled, every time I managed to pull a genuine reaction from him, those moments became treasures, tiny victories, because Alistair didn't give pieces of himself away easily. Most people only saw the performance, the charm, the radio voice, the perfectly controlled smile. But occasionally, very occasionally, something real slipped through, A laugh that lasted a second too long. A smile that wasn't calculated. A glance that softened before he realized what he was doing. And every single time it happened, I felt absurdly proud of myself. As though I discovered something precious, something hidden, something no one else got to see. I think that's when I started getting into trouble. Because eventually I stopped looking for reasons to talk to him and started creating them. I'd find excuses to visit I'd find excuses to visit the hotel, excuses to start conversations, excuses to keep excuses to keep him around just a little longer. Most of them were terrible. One time, I spent an hour pretending I needed help choosing a bow tie. I owned hundreds of bow ties. Another time, I claimed I wanted his opinion on interior decorating. His response was to tell me my taste was an assault upon the senses. I smiled for the rest of the day. Looking back, that probably should have been my first clue. Then, there were the moments that truly ruined me. The quiet ones. The quiet moments. The ones where Alistair forgot to be Alistair. The moments when the room emptied and the performance faded. When his voice grew softer. When his shoulders relaxed. When he looked tired. Lonely. Lost. Those moments hurt. Because beneath all the confidence and sarcasm and terrifying power, I saw someone carrying centuries of loneliness. Someone who expected everyone to leave eventually. Someone who had convinced himself he didn't need anyone. And for the first time in a very long time, I wanted to prove someone wrong. I wanted him to stay. Not because Charlie wanted him there. Not because the hotel needed him. Not because hell benefited from his presence. I wanted him to stay because the thought of him leaving suddenly felt unbearable. That realization terrified me because I had spent thousands of years losing people, watching people leave, watching people drift away, watching relationships crumble. I had promised myself I would never care that deeply again. And then along came a smug, smiling radio host who made that promise impossible to keep. The worst part, I don't think he had any idea what he was doing to me. Or maybe he did. Sometimes I still wonder, but I remember the exact moment I knew I was doomed. Not interested, not fascinated, doomed. He laughed. That's it. Nothing dramatic, nothing world-changing. Just a laugh, a real one, warm, bright, unrestrained. And for a brief second, I forgot we were in hell. For a brief second, everything felt lighter. And when the sound faded, I realized I wanted to hear it again. Forever, if possible. That was the moment I knew there was absolutely no saving me. Because somewhere between the arguments and the teasing and the accidental late-night conversations and all the reasons I invented just to see him, I'd fallen in love. And judging by the way he looked at me sometimes, I had a feeling I wasn't the only idiot in this story. Alistair. I thought it was the beginning of an annoyance. Lucifer. I thought it was the beginning of a rivalry. Both. Neither of us realized it was the beginning of everything. The end of Chapter 1. I hope you all enjoyed listening. See you later, my little downloads. Bye!